We are a 501c3 dedicated to being the voice for our wildlife and outdoor spaces. And I would like to introduce our panelists. And Mark, do you want to go first and introduce your name and organization?
Sure. My name is Mark Peckham, and I am the Nevada organizer for the Environmental Defense Action Fund, which is the advocacy partner of the Environmental Defense Fund, longstanding national environmental org.
And then Brendan?
Brendan Schnieder, Senior Air Quality Specialist for the Washoe County Health District Air Quality Management Division.
Perfect. Mercedes?
Yeah, I'm Mercedes Davis. I'm the community organizer for Defend Our Future, which is a project of the Environmental Defense Fund, really focused on empowering young people to get involved in the climate crisis.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining. And then Jen, are you able to share?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I don't know why the camera is not working right now, but I am here. So hopefully we can work that out. But yes, my name is Jennifer and I'm with Moms Clean Air Force Nevada. And I am so thankful to be here. I opened the chapter here about 6 years ago and clean air is our deal. So we're so excited to be a part of this panel right now. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, obviously, thanks for being able to join us. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today. And as Jen said, we're going to be talking about air quality today. And some of the reasons why I felt this was going to be an important issue to discuss is Nevada's human population is growing at a very fast rate. Our cities in Las Vegas and Reno are some of the fastest growing cities in the country year after year, which means more people living in our urban areas and more factories and production are going to be coming into our state. And a lot of times, when you have more factories and production, you have lesser air quality. And already a 2022 study found that Nevada already has the nation's second worst air quality as far as air pollution in general. And we want to make sure that our current and future residents are still able to enjoy the benefits of recreating on our public lands, which I think every Nevadan cares about. And it's, I think personally, one of the biggest benefits of living in a state like Nevada that has over 80% of public lands, and being able to recreate outdoors is something very important to me, and I think other Nevadans as well. And having the threat of hazardous air quality every day certainly puts a strain on that. And obviously, I can't speak for all residents of the state, but I would assume that Reno and Las Vegas residents would not like to have the reputation that Los Angeles, California did in the 80s, where it's just all smoke and smog covered. Hopefully we were able to enact some research and actions that will keep our air quality clean from now and into future generations. So before I kick it off to the experts on this panel, I wanted to go over some definitions that you might hear during their talk. And one of those is going to be particulate pollution or particle pollution. And that is usually soot or tiny particles that are mainly coming from coal-fired power plants, which we don't have a whole lot in the state, but we do have a lot of diesel emissions and wildfire smoke. And at least here in Reno, this past year was pretty good, but 2020 and 2021 were certainly no summer picnic due to the smoke problems that we had up here. And when these particles enter your lungs, it can trigger asthma attacks, heart attacks, strokes, and even can be lethal. And a good analogy is, or a good representation of breathing these particulate matter can irritate your lungs, and essentially is similar to, say, having a bad sunburn, but that sunburn is within your lungs, so it does cause quite a bit of damage. And another type of pollution you might hear is called ozone pollution, which is commonly referred to as smog. And that's the pollution that's emitted by cars, power plants, refineries, and chemical plants. And millions of Americans are especially vulnerable to the effects of air pollution, including children and older adults. And roughly 9% of Clark County residents have asthma, as well as 9% of Washoe County residents have asthma, and that's both adults and children. And people who work or exercise outdoors face increased risk because of that, but also outdoor recreationalists, including hikers, hunters, backpackers, campers. And when you're not allowed to go outside, that definitely causes strain on your mental health. And I'm speaking from personal experience, because it was not all that great to be told not to go outside because your air was too bad to breathe. And with climate change happening and the increase in wildfires in California, but also in this state, I think wildfire smoke is certainly going to be an issue here in the coming years. And already 4 in 10 Americans live in a city where their air has earned an F ranking by the American Lung Association. And this past study, Reno and Vegas received an F ranking in that report. So what I would like to do now is kick it over to the experts that we have here today. And the first person I want to ask a question to is Brendan. And Brendan, thanks again for being here today. And the first thing I want to ask you is, in general, where does Northern Nevada's air quality rank within the United States?
So unfortunately, Washoe County ranks in the top 25 for both ground level ozone and particulate matter for the worst cities. So according to the American Lung Association's most polluted cities ranking, we are 12th worst for particulate matter pollution and 21st worst for ground level ozone. However, we haven't always been this polluted. Really since 2013, nearly every year after, wildfires have turned Reno Sparks from one of the cleaner Western metro areas to one of the worst. Despite all of our efforts locally in the health district in reducing emissions, the emissions we cannot control from wildfires leaves us little options to combat the number one environmental pollutant Northern Nevada's face each fire season, which is mainly PM 2.5. But if we were to magically remove all of the wildfire smoke from our air every summer, we would still have a ground level ozone problem, mainly due to motor vehicles and the gasoline storage, pumping, and refueling operations needed for mobile sources of air pollution.
Perfect. Then, you mentioned, we both in Reno here, we have the particulate, the PM, and the ozone. And recently, the American Rescue Fund approved just over $200,000 for air monitoring systems in the western part of Reno. I'm assuming that's going to benefit, how we plan and react to air quality by having that extra data.
Correct. So those funds essentially will fund a brand new monitoring station, which will likely be located near Verdi Elementary School. We're hoping to start the new station within the next year or two. The ozone and particulate matter monitors at this station will provide the West Reno residents, including Verdi and Mogul and Somerset, accurate air pollution data to help them better understand what they're breathing every day. School closures, canceling outdoor events, and modifying everyday routines are all things people will do with this data. And we'll send the data from this monitoring station, like our other 7 monitoring stations, to Air Now every hour. The data will also show if there are any local sources of air pollution that may not be following our rules. Another benefit is being able to detect wildfire smoke as soon as it enters Nevada. We know from previous wildfire events that this area in particular gets hit first and the worst. Also, the meteorological instruments from this station is also used by other government entities, including the National Weather Service, which is one of our premier federal partners in the area.
That's great. I am a big believer in the more data you have, the smarter you can make your decisions. So having those monitoring systems in Verdi, which, like you said, is kind of where that first California smoke hits here once it crosses over the Sierras, I think will be very, very helpful. And the last question I had for you is obviously funding for these stations is always a hurdle, and it seems like we hopefully got past that. But I was wondering what other future challenges you see here in Northern Nevada and Reno, particular Washoe County, on keeping our air clean.
So the ongoing threat of wildfire smoke is easily the biggest challenge. It is one that doesn't have a really short-term solution. Long-term forest management and sustainability efforts throughout the Western U.S. is really the best bet we have to fight this threat of air pollution. For our own air pollution that Washoe County residents and businesses emit, the biggest challenge, like you mentioned, was population growth. More people means more motor vehicles, which is the #1 source of air pollution that we generate in Washoe County. They will take national and local efforts to reduce emissions from internal combustion engines via electrifying the fleet, making public and active transit options more desirable, and long-term land use planning oriented around reducing vehicle miles traveled.
Perfect. And I think the state legislation has some bills in their last session, but also maybe this session that will help with vehicle pollution. So that's going to be very exciting to keep an eye on as well. But thank you for that intel and those answers. I think that's a lot of great information. And Jennifer, I wanted to talk to you as a Northern Nevada resident. I was wondering if you could talk about how Washoe County's air quality has affected you personally living here in the area.
Yes, so I am a mother of 3 beautiful boys. I also am a born and raised Nevadan, so I never had any allergy or asthma issues growing up as a child. Honestly, I don't even remember too many of my friends having asthma. But in my 20s, I kept getting reoccurring sinus infections, and my doctor that would go into bronchitis and then pneumonia. And it literally became a joke of, can you get here before it goes into pneumonia? So with that, he started doing research and found out with testing me, with getting my lungs tested, that I had allergic asthma. And this is when I was informed that it's because of how the climate is changing around us. It has to do with the heavy diesel trucks coming through and how it's commuting, the mining, the farming, everything that adds to it, let alone I live in the Carson Valley where it's a bowl, with mountains surrounding us, and anything that's coming into the area from wildfire smoke, anything else, it gets trapped here for a couple of days. So my lungs became extra sensitive to that. And then my children being born, my youngest was born during the Yosemite fire, which is by far the worst fire I ever saw at that point, where we couldn't see the mountains for for a whole week. And it really caught my attention, and I wanted to know more about it. And that's why I started doing some research, talking to my doctor. And that's how I came across with Mom's Clean Air Force and opening the chapter here, because I found out that we didn't even have an air monitoring system in Douglas County. It was set up in Lake Tahoe, part of Douglas County, but not down in the valley. So that's how I started my work with Mom's Clean Air Force, and wanting to stand up not only for people like myself, born and raised, never experienced any allergies or asthma issues. And then now I have, after having COVID, since my lungs were already a weak point, I got diagnosed with COPD afterwards. So for my children and I, when the wildfire smoke is happening, it's definitely a huge impact for us. We've definitely felt it through the pandemic even more because we couldn't go outside for reasons of the virus, but also when the wildfire smoke came in for pretty much the whole summer of 2020, we were just really trapped inside. We couldn't walk outside. So it's why it's my passion to make sure that we know what's going on with our air quality at all levels, whether it's the rural communities or the cities, and what's causing it and how can we take action now.
Yep, no, I absolutely agree. And thanks for sharing that. And I think that's why when I was talking to Brendan, having increased air quality quality monitoring systems, I think is just going to be a benefit. And there's really no negatives of putting more of those systems on the landscape. And something that is also included in that American Rescue Plan that's giving just over $200,000 to Washoe County for those systems is they're going to also designate roughly $700,000 to put those air quality monitoring systems on tribal lands throughout Nevada, which again, I think is also going to be very important to monitor the air quality on tribal lands and make sure that they're taking the correct action and have the right data to make decisions as well. So all good things when it comes to installing more air quality monitoring systems on the landscape. And the next question I had.
Could I say something real fast?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really excited that you brought that up because actually two of the tribes that we've been working with, the Fort McDermott Paiute Shoshone tribe outside of Winnemucca, and also the Fallon Paiute Shoshone tribe just received two of those grants, one of them being almost $500,000. So that's something I started working on in 2021 with the tribe and letting them know about air quality, how it affects, especially with the native tribes having heart and lung issues almost 14% higher than any race. So it's really exciting that they're getting their power back by knowing what's going on with their air quality to make better decisions for their family's health and all across the border.
I could not agree more. And kind of going on that same thread, I wanted to ask why you think it's vital for future generations to have access to clean air.
So one thing I love about the Indigenous community, like we were just talking about right now, is every decision they make in action around the environment, even in other issues, but if we're just talking about environment right now, they think about how is this going to affect the next 7 generations in front of us? And I love that concept. So having air monitoring systems when we have industries coming in to make sure that the air is clean. And just for my personal experience, we had an asphalt factory here in Carson City that was, spewing the whatever they were burning. We know for sure that they were making the typical stuff, but there was other stuff coming in that it was toxic to the community right below. And the city of Carson City passed it because it was in an industry where they could have an asphalt factory, but they didn't think about looking right over the border, only about 40 steps from the factory, that there was a low income community that all of the byproducts were landing on them. So it was one of my first acts here in Nevada with helping stand by that community side and speaking up. And we got an air monitoring system to show what was going on and how bad the air was. And this is what ultimately saved the community from that happening to them anymore. The factory got shut down. So I think it's really important that I know for myself as a mother that we're able to know what's going on outside. And these purple air monitoring systems that the government has allowed many of us to put on our homes, and now you can see it through airnow.gov. And you can see the link, it says fire when you go to the website, or if you look through the app, and you'll see the purple air monitoring systems all across the state that people are putting on their houses, and you can get right now time of what's going on with our air quality versus the bigger monitoring systems, from my understanding, have to go to the EPA, do some number work, and then it's about an hour delayed before we see the actual air quality. So I see huge improvements in this area, and it's only going to help us with our health and living a happier life, and also getting some answers on how we can make direct climate action with seeing what's actually going on in our air.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for flagging that website, airnow.gov. I know in 2020, it was probably my most visited website because I felt like I was checking that every half an hour to make sure if I could go outside or not. So definitely a great resource for people who want to know, almost the real-time air quality in their area. And I think that's a great resource for people to check out. So now that
I think it's also really good that they, when you look at it, when we have the wildfires, to really make sure that you know what's going on with the ground ozone as well, which it is on there because wildfires will bring that up in our community. And I find with having COPD and asthma that I'm actually more sensitive to the ground ozone. So having that information is really helpful as well.
Absolutely. And before we turn it over to our Las Vegas representatives, Brendan, I was wondering if I could put you on the spot and if you could describe what a inversion is, because I think that's important when we talk about ozone pollution and kind of why it's just kind of hovers over the city.
So in Nevada, a lot of our cities are located in valleys. Valleys can sort of trap air in summer and in wintertime and invert it in ways that make sure that the cold air stays low and the hot air is above it. It kind of acts as sort of a lid and traps all the air pollution near the surface and can really kind of concentrate it more so than on a windy day when you have adequate mixing. So it sort of really cools the air down in the winter time, causes a lot more people to burn wood, and generally creates more air pollution because of that weather condition.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I know when I first heard the term inversion, it was when I was training to be a wildland firefighter. And until then, I had no idea. But seeing it for the first time, because I grew up on the East Coast, which there may be some inversion, but you really see it out here when you can see, 20 miles and you're up on the mountains, and it just seems like there's a layer and it's not moving anywhere. So it's interesting to see, but also not the best for our health a lot of the times. So thanks for explaining that.
Yep.
So Mark, I wanted to get to you as a Las Vegas resident. I want to make sure that we're covering as much of the state as possible on this. And I was wondering, what is the leading cause for Las Vegas's poor air quality?
Yeah, so I think that in many ways it's similar to what you have up in Reno, except a lot less. I mean, I'm thankful for this, a lot less forest fires. But number one is transportation. This is, even by the standards of the United States, an incredibly car-dependent city. It also obviously has a major interstate highway run right through it. So not only do we deal with local residents, but tourists coming from California, people making their drive up, people and shipping and all sorts of things making the drive up to Utah. That's all coming through. That's all generating air pollution. And then the number two is industry, of which we have a fair amount. But I think the thing about Las Vegas is it's not necessarily that we have an unusual amount of generated pollution, but it's exactly what you were talking about with the inversion, in that we're in a valley, and between that and kind of the heat and how dry it is here, a lot of that pollution just sticks right near the ground. And as someone who I think like you, I like to get out and enjoy our public lands. Anytime I am out, along the periphery of that valley, whether that's up in Red Rock Canyon or somewhere out in Henderson at a higher elevation where you can see the valley spread out before you, you can see this layer of like brown air, hovering right over the city.
Yeah, exactly. And then that was one of the first times I saw it here in Nevada, was driving down from Reno to Las Vegas, and you could kind of see it on the horizon there. So my next question for you is kind of a two-parter. And I wanted to ask, why is it important to take action to improve your city's air quality? And is there any action being taken either in Las Vegas or in, as a nation in general, to help improve our air quality?
So as to why, I think that's a little self-explanatory. Just in that, you mentioned this yourself. We have, somewhere around 9% of our population has asthma. That is both a disaster at the individual level. Those people, their lives are harder. People are dying prematurely. And it's also, at a society level, that means people are missing days of work because they're sick, or they're skipping, or they're less effective. it disrupts your whole society when that many people are ill. It also, we're in the midst of hopefully a tail end of a global respiratory pandemic. It makes people more vulnerable. It's a pre-existing condition. These things cascade. It puts more pressure on our healthcare system that's already somewhat fragile down here. So I think why we need to clean that up is, there are tons of reasons, both from the individual level, like just people are suffering, people have worse health, to all sorts of society-wide reasons as well. As to what's being done, I think there is some good news here. As I said, the number one source of that pollution here in the Las Vegas Valley is transportation. And so anything we can do to get, less internal combustion engines on the road is a win. And so the bipartisan infrastructure bill, contained money to roll out electric vehicle charging stations at great numbers. And the Inflation Reduction Act had a lot of money to help subsidize the purchase of electric vehicles for people, both at an individual and institutional level. We actually just saw last month, Clark County School District just rolled out their very first electric public school bus. And so I think in terms of, getting internal engines off the road, everyone we can get off the road, every time we can reduce vehicle miles traveled in a internal combustion vehicle, that's a huge win. And so that comes into replacing them with electric vehicles. They don't have a tailpipe and aren't spewing that pollutant. It also comes in terms of increasing public transit usage and making more walkable communities. And so there are a number of things that can be done there. Nationally, though, there's I want to mention there's a campaign that my organization, EDF Action, is a part of, as well as Nevada Wildlife Federation, called the Solutions for Pollution campaign, which is really about getting the EPA to crack down, especially on some of those industrial sources of pollutant. A lot of that stuff hasn't been updated since the Obama administration. The Trump administration declined. And there's been a lot of science in that time, both showing how detrimental these air pollutants are, but also a lot of technological advancement that makes it a lot more cost effective for industry to be cleaner. And so I think there's a lot that can be done through tightening those standards. There's a public comment window right now at the EPA for soot rule for that exact particulate pollution we've been talking about as one of the two main sources. And so if they can tighten those rules, that'll make a big impact as well.
Perfect. Agreed. And yeah, thanks for flagging all those actions and those resources. That's all great stuff. Mercedes, I wanted to come to you now as our other Las Vegas resident. And I heard that you are kind of a new Las Vegas resident. And the question I had for you is, in a 2019 study, the American Lung Association ranked Las Vegas as the 13th most polluted city. And as a new resident of the city, were you aware of how poor the city's air quality was before you moved there? And was that something that came up to you to check out before moving to the area?
No, I was not aware of how poor the city's air quality was. I think the first thing I noticed was how freaking hot it was. Like,